In 2014, a quiet and controlled action thriller hit theaters and reminded audiences that justice does not always wear a badge. The Equalizer, directed by Antoine Fuqua and starring Denzel Washington, reintroduced a classic television character to a new generation. But this was not just another revenge movie filled with explosions and one-liners. It was a slow-burning, character-driven story about a man who tried to leave violence behind, only to be pulled back in when he witnessed cruelty he could not ignore. At first glance, The Equalizer looks like a standard vigilante film. A mysterious man with a dangerous past steps in to protect the innocent from powerful criminals. But as the story unfolds, it becomes clear that this movie is more than just action. It is about control, discipline, morality, and the personal cost of violence. The film carefully builds tension, taking its time to show who Robert McCall is before revealing what he is capable of. Denzel Washington plays Robert McCall as a man of routine. He works at a home improvement store. He lives alone in a modest apartment. He reads classic books late at night in a diner. He times himself when completing tasks. Everything in his life is structured and calm. But beneath that calm surface is someone extremely dangerous. The film slowly lets the audience understand that McCall is not ordinary. He is watching. He is calculating. He is always prepared. The story truly begins when McCall forms a quiet friendship with a young girl named Alina, played by Chloë Grace Moretz. She is a teenager trapped in the world of Russian organized crime, forced into prostitution. Their late-night conversations at the diner are simple but meaningful. McCall sees her pain. He recognizes that she has no one protecting her. And when she is brutally beaten by her handlers, something inside him changes. This moment is the emotional trigger of the film. It is not about revenge for himself. It is about justice for someone who cannot fight back. McCall approaches the Russian gangsters calmly, offering money in exchange for Alina's freedom. He believes he can solve the problem peacefully. But when they refuse and mock him, the situation explodes. In one of the most memorable scenes of the film, McCall eliminates multiple armed criminals in under a minute using only objects found in the room. From that point on, the movie transforms into a battle between one disciplined man and an organized crime syndicate. The Russian mafia sends a ruthless enforcer named Teddy, played by Martin Chokas, to investigate. Teddy is cold, intelligent, and just as methodical as McCall. This sets up a psychological and physical chess match between two professionals. What makes The Equalizer stand out in the action genre is its pacing. The film does not rush. It allows the audience to sit with McCall's choices. Every act of violence feels deliberate. Every move is calculated. The action scenes are intense, but they are built on character motivation rather than spectacle alone. When McCall fights, it is not chaotic. It is precise and almost surgical. The tone of the film is serious and grounded. There is very little humor. The atmosphere feels heavy and realistic. The violence is brutal, but it serves the story. It shows the harsh reality of the world McCall steps back into. At the same time, the movie constantly reminds us that McCall does not enjoy killing. He gives people chances. He offers alternatives. Violence is his last option, not his first. Another important aspect introduced early in the film is the idea of redemption. McCall is a man trying to live a normal life. He is reading books about self-improvement. He is helping his coworkers at the store gain confidence. He is mentoring a young security guard who wants to lose weight and join the police academy. These small acts of kindness show that McCall wants to build, not destroy. But when evil becomes too loud, he cannot ignore it. The Equalizer sets up a powerful central question. Can someone with a violent past truly escape who they are? Or is justice sometimes only possible through force? The film does not rush to answer. Instead, it slowly builds toward a confrontation that feels inevitable. This introduction to The Equalizer shows us that we are not just watching an action movie. We are watching the story of a man who measures everything in seconds, who weighs every choice carefully, and who decides that protecting the helpless is worth returning to the darkness he tried to leave behind. The Equalizer was released in the United States on September 26, 2014. It is an action thriller directed by Antoine Fuqua and produced by Todd Black, Jason Blumenthal, Steve Tisch, Mace Neufeld, Alex Siskin, and Tony Eldridge. The screenplay was written by Richard Wank. The film is based on the 1980s television series of the same name created by Michael Sloan and Richard Lindheim. However, this movie is not a direct remake of any specific episode. Instead, it reimagines the central character in a modern setting with a new story built for today's audience. The film stars Denzel Washington in the lead role as Robert McCall. This was the first time Washington worked with director Antoine Fuqua since their earlier collaboration on Training Day in 2001. That previous film earned Washington an Academy Award for Best Actor, so their reunion created strong anticipation among fans. The cast also includes Chloë Grace Moretz as Alina, Martin Chokas as the villain Teddy, David Harbour as corrupt Detective Masters, Haley Bennett as Mandy, Bill Pullman as Brian Plummer, and Melissa Leo as Susan Plummer. The Equalizer runs for approximately 132 minutes, which gives it enough time to develop its characters and build tension slowly. It is rated R in the United States due to strong bloody violence, language, and some sexual content. The R rating reflects the film's intense and realistic portrayal of violence, which is a key element of its tone and storytelling style. The movie was distributed by Sony Pictures, releasing under the Columbia Pictures banner. It was produced with an estimated budget of around $55 million. The production took place mainly in Massachusetts, including locations in Boston, Chelsea, Haverhill, and Salisbury. The choice of these locations helped give the film a grounded, urban atmosphere that feels authentic and lived in. Principal photography began in June 2013 and wrapped later that year. Antoine Fuqua aimed to create a film that felt personal and character-focused, rather than just another loud action spectacle. He worked closely with Denzel Washington to shape Robert McCall into a layered and disciplined character. Washington trained physically for the role and worked on portraying McCall's calm, calculated personality. His performance is controlled and restrained, which contrasts strongly with the explosive action scenes. The cinematography was handled by Mauro Fiore, who used a dark and moody visual style to support the film's serious tone. The music score was composed by Harry Gregson Williams. The soundtrack blends orchestral elements with electronic tones, helping to create suspense and emotional depth. The editing was done by Conrad Buff and Tatiana S. Regal, allowing the film to maintain a steady pace while still delivering sharp and impactful action sequences. The Equalizer premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in September 2014 before its wide theatrical release. The marketing campaign focused heavily on Denzel Washington's return to an intense action role. Trailers highlighted both the dramatic tension and the precise, brutal fight scenes that would define the film's identity. Upon release, the movie opened at #1 at the North American box office. It earned strong opening weekend numbers, which showed that audiences were interested in a mature and serious action thriller led by a respected actor. Over time, the film grossed more than $190 million worldwide, making it a commercial success compared to its production budget. Critically, The Equalizer received mixed to positive reviews. Many critics praised Denzel Washington's performance, noting his quiet intensity and strong screen presence. The action sequences were also widely discussed, especially the scenes that showcased McCall's ability to calculate and execute his moves within seconds. Some critics felt the pacing was slower than typical action films, but others appreciated the deliberate build-up and character focus. The success of the film led to the development of a sequel, The Equalizer 2, which was released in 2018. That sequel marked the first time Denzel Washington had ever starred in a direct sequel to one of his films. The continued popularity of the character eventually led to a third installment as well, turning The Equalizer into a modern action franchise. In summary, The Equalizer from 2014 is an R-rated action thriller directed by Antoine Fuqua, starring Denzel Washington as Robert McCall. It was inspired by a classic television series but reimagined for a modern audience. With a strong cast, a disciplined creative team, a moderate production budget, and impressive box office performance, the film successfully launched a new chapter for a well-known character while establishing itself as a serious and grounded entry in the action genre. In the quiet city of Boston, where the nights stretch long and the streets hum with distant sirens and passing headlights, Robert McCall lives a life built on routine. Every morning begins with precision. He wakes at the same time, makes his bed with exact corners, prepares his tea, and reads from classic novels as if memorizing wisdom for survival. His apartment is modest, nearly empty, stripped of anything unnecessary. Discipline defines him. At Home Mart, a large hardware store, he works as a friendly and helpful employee, blending in effortlessly with customers and coworkers. To them, he's just Robert, polite, dependable, observant. But beneath the calm exterior lies something coiled and restrained, something that once belonged to a much darker world. McCall isn't just organized, he's controlled, like a man who has spent years mastering chaos and now lives carefully to keep it buried. Among his co-workers is Ralphie, a security guard trainee who dreams of earning his badge but struggles with his physical fitness exam. Ralphie lacks confidence and discipline, often tempted by junk food and shortcuts. McCall sees potential in him and quietly takes him under his wing. He monitors his meals, encourages healthier choices, and speaks to him with calm authority about commitment and perseverance. McCall doesn't preach, he guides. Small improvements, he implies through action, lead to big results. It's subtle mentorship, but it reveals something essential about him. He cannot stop helping people who want to improve their lives. It gives him purpose in a world where he promised himself he would remain invisible. Sleep, however, is the one thing he cannot discipline into submission. Each night, he lies awake, haunted not by nightmares but by memories and silence. After his wife passed away, he made her a promise to leave behind the life he once lived. A life of violence, secrecy, and government black ops. A life that shaped him into something lethal. But insomnia drives him out of his apartment and into the night, where he finds refuge at an all-night diner glowing softly against the darkness. There, he sits in the same booth every evening, reading thick novels under dim lights while the rest of the city rests. The diner becomes his sanctuary, a place where he can exist without questions. It's in this quiet diner that he meets Terry. She's young, with tired eyes that try to hide behind forced confidence. A prostitute working the late shift, she initially approaches him like any other customer. But McCall doesn't treat her as an object. He speaks to her respectfully. He asks about her interests. He listens. Their conversations grow longer each night, filled with discussions about books and dreams. One evening, she reveals something personal. Her real name is Alina. Terry is just a name given to her by men who control her life. Alina dreams of being a singer. She wants to escape the suffocating world she's trapped in. McCall sees beyond the makeup and rehearsed smiles. He sees a young girl who never truly had a chance. One night, after sharing laughter during a brief walk outside the diner, their fragile peace is shattered. A black car screeches to a stop. Slavy, Alina's pimp, steps out. He is volatile and cruel, his temper always close to the surface. Without hesitation, he strikes her across the face. McCall's body stiffens, his instincts flaring, but he doesn't react impulsively. Slavy forces Alina into the car, warning McCall to stay out of business that isn't his. Before driving off, Slavy casually hands McCall a business card for their escort service, as if the humiliation wasn't enough. McCall stands in silence, watching the car disappear into the night, holding the card between steady fingers. Days later, Alina doesn't show up at the diner. McCall senses something is wrong. Then he hears the truth. She's been beaten nearly to death and lies in the ICU. The reason? She refused a client known for extreme violence. Slavy punished her brutally for disobedience. The news settles heavily inside McCall. He visits the hospital and sees her fragile form connected to machines, her dreams nearly extinguished. Something changes in him at that moment. The promise to his wife clashes with the reality in front of him. He tried to stay out. He tried to live quietly. But some injustices demand correction. McCall visits a Russian-owned restaurant known as a mob front. Inside a private room filled with armed men and arrogance, he calmly asks to speak with Slavy. There's no anger in his voice, only resolve. He places $9,800 in cash on the table, enough to buy Alina's freedom. He tells Slavi to let her go. Slavi laughs, mocking the idea that she's anything more than property. To him, she's a commodity. He insults McCall, dismissing him as an old man playing hero. McCall nods as if accepting defeat. He gathers his coat and walks toward the exit. But just before leaving, he pauses. He turns back. What follows happens in less than 20 seconds. The room transforms into calculated chaos. McCall uses whatever is within reach: a corkscrew, a wine glass, a knife, a gun taken from a startled guard. His movements are fluid, precise, almost rehearsed. He anticipates reactions before they happen. Each strike is deliberate, each second measured. Slavi and his men don't stand a chance. It isn't rage driving him, it's cold efficiency. When the violence ends, 5 men lie dead, and McCall calmly removes the security footage before stepping back into the Boston night as though nothing occurred. What he doesn't know is that Slavi was part of something much larger. His death sends shockwaves through a powerful Russian crime syndicate led by oligarch Vladimir Pushkin. In Moscow, Pushkin receives reports of the massacre. Money lost. Operations disrupted. Men eliminated. This wasn't random street violence, it was a direct challenge. Pushkin responds by sending his most trusted enforcer to Boston. His name is Teddy. Intelligent, relentless, and devoid of mercy, Teddy arrives with one objective: find the man responsible and make an example of him. Back in Boston, Robert McCall resumes his routine. He helps customers at Home Mart. He encourages Ralphie. He returns to the diner booth that now feels emptier without Alina. On the surface, life continues as normal. But beneath the calm exterior, a quiet war has begun. And the storm moving toward him is far from over. Teddy wastes no time establishing control. Unlike the loud brutality of Slavi, Teddy operates with quiet calculation, studying the streets of Boston like a chessboard. He understands that fear spreads faster than bullets, and so he begins by sending messages. Rival gangs are questioned, pressured, and beaten for information. When Irish mob lieutenant Little John Looney claims ignorance, Teddy nearly beats him to death, not because he believes he is lying, but because someone has to suffer publicly. Blood on the pavement is a language everyone understands. Word spreads quickly across the underworld that Moscow is angry, and someone is going to pay. Meanwhile, Robert McCall continues living in disciplined silence, but the air around him feels heavier. He knows men like Slavi do not operate alone. Killing 5 mobsters does not end a problem, it creates a larger one. Yet he does not run. He does not hide. Instead, he watches. He studies the patterns forming around him. When Teddy's men begin tracing connections between the diner, the hospital, and Slavi's last known movements, McCall realizes the net is tightening. Still, he remains calm. Panic is for amateurs. He has survived wars far more complex than this. At Home Mart, life continues with fragile normalcy. Ralphie pushes himself harder, determined to pass his security guard qualification exam. McCall encourages him but notices something else troubling the young man. Ralphie's family restaurant has been targeted by corrupt Boston police officers who demand protection money. When Ralphie's mother refuses to keep paying, the restaurant is mysteriously set on fire. It is labeled an accident, but everyone understands the truth. Ralphie feels powerless, forced to withdraw his security guard application to help rebuild what was destroyed. McCall listens carefully as Ralphie explains the situation, anger simmering beneath the surface of his otherwise respectful tone. That night, McCall pays a visit to the corrupt officers. He does not shout or threaten recklessly. Instead, he corners them individually, dismantling their confidence piece by piece. He reveals he knows every dollar they extorted, every false report they filed, every corner they cut. His presence alone is enough to unsettle them. When they attempt to intimidate him, they quickly realize they have miscalculated. McCall forces them to repay every cent they stole from families like Ralphie's. It's not just vengeance, it's correction. Order restored. Within days, Ralphie's family restaurant reopens, and the young man regains his confidence. Soon after, he passes his exam and becomes an official security guard at Home Mart. To Ralphie, McCall is simply a mentor. He has no idea the man he admires is dismantling criminal networks in the shadows. Teddy, however, is beginning to connect the dots. He studies the precision of Slavy's execution and understands immediately that this was not random violence. The killer is trained, disciplined, possibly military. When Teddy reviews footage and witness statements, one name surfaces repeatedly: Robert McCall. A quiet man who paid Slavy a visit shortly before his death. Teddy's interest sharpens. Instead of killing him outright, he becomes intrigued. A man with such skill could be valuable, perhaps recruitable. But first, he must be tested. Teddy pays McCall a visit, posing as a detective investigating the restaurant incident. He sits in McCall's modest apartment, eyes scanning every detail. He presents a photograph. Mandy, Alina's friend from the diner, murdered for withholding information. The image is meant as a warning. Teddy watches McCall carefully, searching for a crack in the calm exterior. But McCall barely reacts. His face remains composed, his breathing steady. When Teddy leaves, he carries with him both frustration and fascination. This is no ordinary opponent. Understanding the threat is escalating, McCall travels to Virginia to visit old friends, Susan and Brian Plummer, fellow retired operatives. Their reunion is warm but layered with unspoken history. Susan quickly gathers intelligence on Pushkin's organization. She uncovers Teddy's real identity: Nikolai Yachenko, former Spetsnaz operative turned Russian secret police enforcer. Efficient, ruthless, loyal only to power. Susan also reveals disturbing news. 2 Boston detectives connected to Pushkin have already been murdered, and another, Frank Masters, has disappeared. McCall listens carefully, absorbing every detail. He doesn't explicitly ask for help, but Susan understands him well enough to know he is seeking something deeper, not assistance, but permission. Permission to return fully to the man he once was. Back in Boston, McCall targets Frank Masters, the missing detective. He traps Masters inside his own car and floods it with carbon monoxide, forcing him into cooperation. The message is clear: help dismantle Pushkin's operations, or suffocate in your corruption. Masters breaks quickly, revealing the locations of money laundering fronts and key distribution routes. Using this information, McCall systematically destroys one of Pushkin's financial pipelines. When police arrive at the scene, they find Masters and several of Pushkin's men arrested, along with a note instructing authorities to follow the money. McCall isn't just fighting physically, he's dismantling infrastructure. Pushkin grows impatient in Moscow. His profits are shrinking. His shipments disrupted. His enforcer challenged. He contacts Teddy with a blunt ultimatum: kill McCall or don't come back. For Teddy, failure is not an option. Teddy retaliates aggressively. He begins targeting everything connected to McCall. Surveillance intensifies. Associates are questioned. Pressure builds. But McCall continues striking first, destroying a cargo ship used to smuggle goods, crippling another revenue stream. Each move is deliberate, strategic. This is no longer about one girl in a hospital bed. It is about dismantling an empire built on exploitation and fear. Teddy finally decides to escalate beyond subtlety. If McCall values ordinary people so much, then ordinary people will become leverage. And so, he sets a trap that will force McCall into the open. A confrontation not in shadows, but in a place McCall considers safe. The war that began in a quiet restaurant is about to erupt in a far more personal battlefield. Teddy understands that men like Robert McCall do not respond to threats against themselves. They respond to threats against others. So instead of hunting McCall in the streets, he strikes somewhere far more personal. One night, armed men storm Home Mart after closing hours. The employees, including Ralphie, are rounded up and held hostage among the aisles of tools and construction materials. The bright, familiar store is transformed into a silent battlefield. Teddy calls McCall with a simple demand: surrender, or everyone inside dies. It is not an empty threat. Teddy has already proven he is willing to kill to send a message. When McCall receives the call, there is no panic in his expression. He listens carefully, absorbing every detail: the number of men, their positions, the tone in Teddy's voice. He agrees to meet, but instead of walking into the trap as expected, he chooses a different path. He enters Home Mart quietly, slipping inside like a shadow. The store that once symbolized his attempt at normal life now becomes something else entirely: terrain. He knows every aisle, every shelf, every tool. To Teddy's men, it is a warehouse of products. To McCall, it is an arsenal. Inside, the hostages are terrified. Ralphie tries to stay calm, remembering the discipline McCall taught him. Suddenly, the lights begin to fail one section at a time. Darkness spreads across the store, disorienting the gunmen. McCall has cut the power strategically, forcing them to rely on flashlights and nerves. Overhead announcements echo faintly as McCall's voice guides Ralphie to move the hostages towards safety when the opportunity arises. Teddy quickly realizes something is wrong. This is no longer his trap. It has become McCall's. One by one, Teddy's men begin to fall. A nail gun becomes a deadly projectile weapon. A power drill turns into an instrument of precise force. Barbed wire, hammers, blades, every object is repurposed with terrifying creativity. McCall moves silently, calculating timing down to the second. He studies each opponent's breathing, their hesitation, their fear. In seconds, he anticipates outcomes and executes solutions. This is not reckless violence. It is methodical elimination. The store echoes with brief struggles, then silence. Ralphie, despite instructions to stay hidden, returns to help when he hears the fighting escalate. In the chaos, he is shot in the leg. The injury is painful but not fatal. McCall reaches him quickly, applying pressure and issuing calm instructions. Even now, his voice never rises. He tells Ralphie to restore power to the building after exactly 40 seconds. The specificity is deliberate. Every movement has already been calculated. In the final confrontation, McCall faces Teddy's remaining men. He sets up small propane and oxygen canisters inside a microwave, connecting the trap to the electrical system. When Ralphie restores the power, the microwave activates, triggering a violent explosion that eliminates the last of the henchmen. The blast shakes the store, flames briefly illuminating the darkness. Smoke clears to reveal only two men left standing, McCall and Teddy. Their fight is brutal and personal. Teddy is highly trained, strong, and relentless. He respects McCall's skill but underestimates his resolve. The two exchange calculated strikes, grappling through shattered glass and overturned shelves. Teddy mocks McCall's attempt at living a normal life, calling it weakness. But McCall sees it differently. Choosing restraint was never weakness. It was discipline. In the final moments, McCall gains the upper hand and uses a nail gun to end the confrontation. Teddy falls, defeated not just physically but strategically. The enforcer sent to restore order has been dismantled completely. With the immediate threat neutralized, McCall knows the root of the problem still remains. Vladimir Pushkin sits safely in Moscow, insulated by wealth and power. As long as Pushkin lives, the cycle continues. So McCall boards a flight to Russia without fanfare. There is no dramatic announcement, no warning. He infiltrates Pushkin's heavily guarded residence with the same precision he displayed in Boston. Guards are dispatched quietly, efficiently. McCall studies the layout, anticipates patrol routes, and disables security systems without triggering widespread alarm. When he finally confronts Pushkin, the oligarch attempts to negotiate, to threaten, to bargain. But McCall is not there for discussion. He rigs an electrical trap within the room, turning Pushkin's own environment against him. In seconds, the empire that relied on intimidation collapses at its source. Pushkin is killed, and with him, the leadership structure that fueled exploitation across continents. It is not chaos McCall leaves behind, it is a vacuum. After returning to Boston, life resumes its quiet rhythm, but something has shifted. Alina has recovered from her injuries. She meets McCall again at the diner, this time not as Terry the prostitute, but as Alina, a young woman with a second chance. Gratitude fills her voice as she thanks him, but McCall does not seek recognition. Seeing her alive and hopeful is enough. Ralphie continues working as a security guard, stronger and more confident than before. The people McCall helped move forward, unaware of the full cost paid to protect them. Yet McCall understands something fundamental now. He tried to bury his past, to live anonymously and suppress his abilities. But the world does not stop producing injustice simply because he chooses to look away. His skills were not erased by retirement, they were refined by it. And so, instead of hiding, he adapts. Quietly, he posts an online advertisement offering help to those with nowhere else to turn. No flashy alias. Just a promise. A chance for balance. Soon, a new plea for help arrives. McCall reads it carefully, closes his book, and stands up from his diner booth. The city outside remains unaware that a guardian walks among them, a man who measures time in seconds, who calculates outcomes before others blink, and who believes that when the powerful prey on the weak, someone must step forward to even the score. And in the silence of another Boston night, Robert McCall answers the call once again. The Equalizer follows a very controlled and deliberate plot structure. Unlike many fast-paced action films that rush into chaos within the first few minutes, this movie takes its time. The narrative flow is steady, calculated, and carefully layered, much like the personality of Robert McCall himself. The structure can be clearly divided into 5 main stages: setup, inciting incident, rising conflict, escalation, and final confrontation. The first act focuses entirely on setup. We are introduced to Robert McCall, played by Denzel Washington, living a quiet life in Boston. He works at a home improvement store called Home Mart. He helps his co-workers. He keeps a strict routine. He wakes up at the same time every day. He eats at the same diner late at night. He reads classic literature, trying to finish the 100 books everyone should read list. These early scenes are slow, almost peaceful. There is no loud action. Instead, the film builds curiosity. The audience senses that McCall is not ordinary, but the story withholds the details. This opening section establishes tone and character before plot. It builds emotional grounding. We see McCall mentoring Ralphie, a security guard at the store who wants to join the police academy. We see McCall helping a coworker stand up to bullies. These moments show that he values justice and self-improvement. The structure here is intentional. The film wants us to care about McCall as a human being before revealing his violent capabilities. The inciting incident occurs when McCall's diner friend, Alina, played by Chloë Grace Moretz, is brutally beaten by her Russian handlers after she refuses a client. This is the moment that disrupts McCall's peaceful world. The story shifts from observation to action. McCall decides to intervene. He first attempts a peaceful solution by offering money to Slavy, the Russian gang leader, in exchange for Alina's freedom. When Slavy refuses and insults him, the tension breaks. McCall eliminates Slavy and his men in a precise and shocking burst of violence. This scene acts as the narrative turning point. From here, the plot transitions into a conflict-driven structure. The Russian mafia cannot ignore the killing of their men. They send Teddy, played by Martin Chokas, to investigate. Teddy is methodical and intelligent. He approaches the situation like a detective, analyzing evidence and interviewing associates. This introduces a parallel narrative. On one side, McCall continues his quiet routine while secretly dismantling the criminal organization. On the other side, Teddy moves closer to identifying his target. The rising conflict phase builds tension steadily. McCall does not go to war in a reckless way. Instead, he strategically targets key figures in the Russian operation. He manipulates financial records. He threatens corrupt police officers. He eliminates criminals with careful planning. Each action escalates the stakes. Teddy becomes increasingly frustrated and aggressive. The film uses this cat-and-mouse structure to maintain suspense. Both men are intelligent. Both are calm under pressure. The narrative flow alternates between their perspectives, creating dramatic tension. Midway through the film, the stakes become personal. Teddy identifies McCall and begins threatening people around him. The violence becomes more direct. The structure shifts from controlled elimination to open confrontation. McCall realizes that staying hidden is no longer possible. The narrative accelerates, but it never feels rushed. Each scene builds logically from the previous one. The escalation leads to the final act, which takes place primarily in the Home Mart store. This setting is not random. The store represents McCall's new life, his attempt at normalcy. Turning it into a battlefield symbolizes the collapse of his peaceful identity. The structure here mirrors the opening act but in reverse. Instead of helping co-workers improve themselves, McCall now uses the store's tools as weapons. Every object becomes part of his strategy. The final confrontation between McCall and Teddy is personal and psychological. Teddy represents chaos and cruelty. McCall represents discipline and moral control. Their conflict resolves not just physically but ideologically. McCall proves that he is willing to return fully to his former identity if it means protecting others. After the climax, the narrative slows again. The resolution shows McCall adopting the role of a true equalizer. He begins helping strangers who cannot defend themselves. The story comes full circle. The structure ends where it began, with quiet routine. But now, the audience understands who McCall truly is. The plot structure of The Equalizer is methodical, character-driven, and symmetrical. It begins with stillness, moves into calculated violence, escalates into open war, and returns to controlled calm. The pacing reflects the mindset of its protagonist, making the narrative flow feel intentional rather than chaotic. The Equalizer is driven more by character psychology than by explosions or spectacle. At the center of the film is Robert McCall, played by Denzel Washington, and his character arc is the foundation of the entire story. His development is subtle, controlled, and layered. Rather than transforming into someone new, McCall slowly accepts who he truly is. His arc is about embracing a buried identity instead of escaping it. At the beginning of the film, McCall is living a quiet, structured life. He works at Home Mart. He keeps his apartment clean and minimal. He times himself while completing simple tasks. He reads classic literature at a diner late at night. These routines show discipline and self-control. They also suggest someone who is trying to manage something inside himself. McCall is not running from his past in a chaotic way. He is controlling it through order and repetition. His early interactions reveal another important layer. He mentors Ralphie, a co-worker who lacks confidence and physical fitness. McCall encourages him to train harder and believe in himself. He helps another co-worker stand up to workplace intimidation. These moments show that McCall naturally moves toward justice. Even without violence, he corrects imbalance wherever he sees it. This is the core of his identity. The turning point in his arc comes through Alina, played by Chloë Grace Moretz. She represents innocence trapped in cruelty. McCall sees her suffering and recognizes that she has no protection. When she is brutally assaulted by her handlers, McCall faces a choice. He can remain in his quiet life, or he can step back into the violent world he left behind. His decision to confront the Russian gangsters marks the reawakening of his former self. However, his arc is not about losing control. It is about controlled return. When he kills Slavy and his men, he does it with precision and calculation. He does not act out of rage. He times himself. He uses available objects as weapons. This scene shows that his old skills never disappeared. They were simply dormant. From this point forward, McCall begins dismantling the criminal organization step by step. As the story progresses, we see that McCall does not enjoy violence. He gives people opportunities to choose differently. He offers money for Alina's freedom before resorting to force. He warns corrupt officers before eliminating them. He believes in giving a chance. This moral code defines him. His development is not about becoming more ruthless. It is about reaffirming his internal rules. By the final act, McCall fully accepts that he cannot separate himself from who he was trained to be. The Home Mart showdown symbolizes this acceptance. The store represents his attempt at normal life. Turning it into a battleground shows that his two identities cannot remain separate. He is both the quiet employee and the highly trained operative. His arc completes when he openly steps into the role of protector. Alina also experiences a smaller but meaningful arc. At first, she is trapped and emotionally numb. Her conversations with McCall reveal intelligence and hidden dreams. After he rescues her, we see her in recovery. She is no longer under control of the Russian mob. While her screen time is limited, she symbolizes hope and second chances. Her presence triggers McCall's transformation, even if her own arc remains understated. Teddy, the antagonist played by Martin Chokas, represents a contrasting arc. He begins confident and composed, sent by his superiors to restore order. He prides himself on efficiency and fear. However, as McCall systematically destroys the organization, Teddy's control weakens. He becomes frustrated and more aggressive. His arc moves in the opposite direction of McCall's. While McCall grows more centered and purposeful, Teddy becomes unstable and desperate. Supporting characters like Ralphie also reflect development themes. Ralphie trains harder and improves his physical condition. He gains confidence and discipline. His growth mirrors McCall's philosophy of self-betterment. This parallel reinforces the idea that strength can be used constructively, not just destructively. Ultimately, the character development in The Equalizer is grounded in identity and choice. McCall begins as a man pretending to be ordinary. He ends as a man who understands that his skills exist for a reason. His arc is not about revenge. It is about responsibility. He realizes that if he has the ability to protect the helpless, then choosing not to act would be a betrayal of his principles. The film presents growth not as change in personality, but as clarity of purpose. McCall does not become someone new. He becomes fully himself. That acceptance defines his character arc and shapes the emotional core of the story. The strength of The Equalizer rests heavily on performance, especially the commanding presence of Denzel Washington. While the film contains intense action and stylized violence, it is the acting that gives the story emotional credibility and psychological weight. Each major performer contributes to the film's grounded tone, but Washington's portrayal of Robert McCall is the clear centerpiece. Denzel Washington approaches McCall with restraint rather than aggression. Instead of playing him as a loud or intimidating action hero, Washington builds the character through silence, posture, and eye movement. In the early scenes, his performance is almost minimalistic. His speech is calm and measured. His body language is controlled. He moves slowly and deliberately. This subtle approach creates tension because the audience senses something beneath the surface. Washington understands that stillness can be more powerful than shouting. One of the most effective aspects of his performance is his use of timing. McCall frequently observes his surroundings before acting. Washington communicates this through focused eye contact and slight head movements. When McCall scans a room before a confrontation, Washington does not overplay the moment. Instead, he allows the audience to see calculation happening internally. This internalized acting style makes the later bursts of violence more impactful. When McCall finally moves, it feels earned and precise. Washington also brings emotional depth to quiet conversations, especially in his scenes with Chloë Grace Moretz. As Alina, Moretz delivers a vulnerable and sincere performance. She portrays a young woman hardened by circumstance but still carrying traces of innocence. Her dialogue exchanges with Washington at the diner feel natural and unforced. Moretz avoids exaggeration, which keeps the relationship grounded. The chemistry between the two actors is subtle and respectful. Washington plays McCall as protective but not intrusive, while Moretz presents Alina as guarded but open to connection. Martin Chokas, who plays the antagonist Teddy, offers a strong counterbalance to Washington's restraint. Chokas builds Teddy as controlled yet unpredictable. His accent, posture, and intense stare give the character a cold presence. While Washington's McCall is calm and centered, Chokas' Teddy carries tension just beneath his surface. He often smiles slightly during moments of cruelty, which creates discomfort. His performance relies on psychological intimidation rather than physical dominance. The dynamic between Washington and Chokas works because both actors understand control. Their scenes together feel like intellectual duels rather than simple hero versus villain encounters. Chokas avoids cartoonish villain behavior. Instead, he plays Teddy as a professional who believes in order and hierarchy. As the story progresses and his authority is challenged, Chokas subtly shifts the performance. His voice becomes sharper. His patience shortens. This gradual unraveling contrasts with McCall's increasing certainty. Supporting performances also contribute to the film's credibility. Bill Pullman and Melissa Leo appear as Brian and Susan Plummer, former colleagues of McCall. Though their screen time is limited, they add important context. Pullman plays Brian with warmth and quiet respect, suggesting shared history without over-explaining it. Melissa Leo brings intelligence and authority to Susan, presenting her as someone who understands exactly who McCall is capable of becoming. Their restrained performances reinforce the idea that McCall's past was significant. David Harbour, playing corrupt Detective Masters, gives a grounded performance that reflects institutional corruption. Harbour avoids dramatic exaggeration. Instead, he portrays Masters as casually corrupt, someone who sees exploitation as routine. This understated approach makes the character believable and realistic. Another important performance comes from Johnny Skordas as Ralphie, McCall's co-worker. Skordas plays Ralphie with insecurity and hope. His physical training journey parallels McCall's disciplined nature. Though he is not central to the action, his growth adds emotional texture to the film. Overall, the acting style across the cast remains consistent with the film's tone. No one overacts. Even during violent scenes, the performances remain controlled. This consistency supports Antoine Fuqua's vision of a serious, grounded thriller rather than a flashy action spectacle. Denzel Washington's performance stands out because of its discipline. He does not rely on loud emotion or dramatic speeches. He builds McCall through precision and internal strength. His portrayal elevates the film beyond genre expectations. By choosing subtlety over spectacle, Washington transforms Robert McCall into a character defined by moral code and quiet authority. The performances in The Equalizer succeed because they prioritize realism and psychological depth. Each actor understands the restrained tone of the film. Together, they create a world that feels believable, intense, and emotionally grounded. Antoine Fuqua's direction in The Equalizer is deliberate, disciplined, and grounded in character psychology. Rather than creating a fast, explosive action spectacle, Fuqua builds a controlled and methodical thriller that mirrors the personality of its main character, Robert McCall. His vision focuses on tension, atmosphere, and moral weight instead of constant movement. Every creative decision, from pacing to framing, supports this serious and focused tone. Fuqua approaches the story with patience. The opening act moves slowly, allowing the audience to observe McCall's routines and habits. Many directors might rush through these early moments to reach the first action scene, but Fuqua does the opposite. He lingers on quiet details. He shows McCall organizing his apartment, working at Home Mart, and reading alone in a diner. This choice is intentional. Fuqua wants the audience to understand who McCall is before seeing what he can do. The violence later in the film feels earned because of this foundation. One of Fuqua's strongest directional choices is his commitment to realism. The action scenes are intense, but they are not exaggerated in a comic book style. When McCall fights, the choreography feels practical and brutal. Fuqua often uses tight framing during combat, keeping the camera close to the action. This creates a sense of intimacy rather than spectacle. The audience does not feel like distant observers. Instead, they feel trapped inside the moment. Fuqua also emphasizes contrast. Much of the film takes place in everyday locations: a hardware store, a diner, small apartments, quiet streets. These ordinary environments make the violence more shocking when it occurs. By placing extreme conflict in normal spaces, Fuqua reinforces the idea that danger can exist anywhere. The Home Mart finale is a clear example of this vision. A place associated with tools and home improvement becomes a battlefield. This transformation reflects McCall's internal conflict between peaceful living and violent skill. Lighting and tone are also central to Fuqua's direction. He favors darker color palettes and shadow-heavy compositions. Many scenes are lit with low, moody lighting, especially during nighttime sequences. This visual approach enhances the film's serious atmosphere. It also supports the moral ambiguity of the story. The world McCall moves through is not bright or hopeful. It is heavy and dangerous. Fuqua's collaboration with Denzel Washington is another key part of his vision. Having worked together previously, the director clearly trusts Washington's ability to carry quiet intensity. Fuqua often allows scenes to breathe, giving Washington space to communicate through subtle expressions rather than dialogue. Long pauses are common. Silence becomes a tool. This restraint separates the Equalizer from louder action films. The pacing reflects Fuqua's confidence in slow escalation. The narrative builds step by step. Each confrontation raises the stakes gradually. Fuqua avoids random action sequences that do not serve the story. Instead, every violent encounter has purpose. McCall's actions are strategic, and the direction reinforces that strategy. The camera often pauses before violence begins, showing McCall analyzing his environment. These moments emphasize calculation over chaos. Fuqua also balances character focus with genre expectations. While the film contains satisfying action sequences, it never forgets its emotional core. Scenes between McCall and Alina are handled with care and quiet empathy. Fuqua does not rush their conversations. He frames them simply, allowing performance to carry the emotion. This reinforces the film's theme of protection and responsibility. The villain, Teddy, is also shaped by Fuqua's direction. Rather than presenting him as purely evil in a loud way, Fuqua allows subtle menace to define the character. Scenes featuring Teddy often feel tense and uncomfortable rather than explosive. This psychological tension strengthens the cat-and-mouse dynamic between hero and antagonist. Overall, Fuqua's vision for the Equalizer is clear and consistent. He creates a world that feels grounded and morally serious. He prioritizes character over spectacle, discipline over chaos, and tension over noise. His direction ensures that the film is not simply about revenge, but about identity and responsibility. Through careful pacing, restrained performances, realistic action, and controlled atmosphere, Antoine Fuqua shapes The Equalizer into a focused and mature thriller. His direction aligns perfectly with the personality of Robert McCall, making the film feel cohesive and intentional from beginning to end. The cinematography of The Equalizer plays a critical role in shaping the film's identity. Shot by Mauro Fiore, the visual style is dark, controlled, and atmospheric. Every frame is designed to reflect the mindset of Robert McCall and the moral weight of the world he moves through. Rather than using bright colors or flashy camera tricks, the film relies on shadow, contrast, and deliberate composition to create tension. One of the most noticeable aspects of the cinematography is the use of low-key lighting. Many scenes take place at night or in dimly lit interiors. Streetlights, desk lamps, and fluorescent store lights become primary light sources. This creates deep shadows and sharp contrasts. The darkness is not accidental. It visually represents the hidden violence and moral gray areas within the story. McCall himself often stands partially in shadow, symbolizing his past and the parts of himself he keeps controlled. Color grading also contributes to the film's tone. The palette leans toward cool blues, grays, and muted earth tones. These colors give the movie a cold and serious atmosphere. Warm colors are used sparingly. When warmth does appear, such as in diner scenes with Alina, it subtly highlights moments of humanity and connection. This contrast helps the audience feel the emotional difference between safety and danger. Camera movement in The Equalizer is steady and intentional. There are very few handheld, shaky shots. Instead, Fiore and Fuqua favor smooth tracking shots and stable framing. This controlled movement mirrors McCall's personality. He is precise and balanced, and the camera reflects that discipline. During action sequences, the camera does not spin wildly. It stays close, focused, and clear. This allows the audience to understand exactly what is happening rather than feeling overwhelmed. Close-ups are used effectively throughout the film. When McCall enters a dangerous situation, the camera often focuses tightly on his eyes. These close-ups show calculation and awareness. The audience can see him scanning details and measuring risk. This visual technique builds suspense before any physical movement occurs. The tension comes from anticipation rather than sudden surprise. Slow motion is another important visual tool. During certain fight scenes, time appears to stretch. This is not just for style. It represents McCall's mental process. He analyzes every possible outcome within seconds. By slowing down the action, the cinematography places viewers inside his perception. We experience the fight the way he does, as a series of controlled decisions rather than chaotic reactions. The use of framing also communicates theme. McCall is often positioned alone in wide shots, surrounded by empty space. This reinforces his isolation. Even in crowded environments, he appears emotionally separate from others. In contrast, scenes featuring the Russian mob often show characters grouped tightly together, emphasizing their collective power. These visual differences subtly reinforce character dynamics without needing dialogue. The Home Mart finale is a strong example of visual storytelling. The bright, industrial lighting of the store contrasts with the darker earlier scenes. However, once the confrontation begins, shadows and sparks fill the space. Tools and aisles create narrow corridors, giving the sequence a maze-like feeling. The environment becomes both weapon and obstacle. The cinematography captures this transformation clearly, making the location feel like an active participant in the action. Reflections and glass surfaces are also used symbolically. McCall is occasionally shown through mirrors or windows. This creates layered images, suggesting dual identity. He is both the calm employee and the lethal operative. These visual compositions reinforce internal conflict without direct explanation. Overall, the cinematography of The Equalizer is restrained but powerful. It does not rely on flashy spectacle. Instead, it builds atmosphere through shadow, color, and composition. The visuals consistently align with the film's serious tone and character-driven narrative. Mauro Fiori's work ensures that every scene supports the emotional and psychological themes of the story. The dark lighting, controlled camera movement, and precise framing all serve one purpose: to immerse the audience in McCall's disciplined world. The result is a visual style that feels cohesive, mature, and intentionally crafted from beginning to end. The editing and pacing of The Equalizer are central to how the film builds tension and delivers impact. Edited by Conrad Buff and Tatiana S. Regal, the movie avoids the fast, chaotic cutting style that defines many modern action films. Instead, it follows a measured rhythm that reflects the personality of Robert McCall. The pacing is deliberate, controlled, and patient, allowing suspense to grow naturally before violence erupts. From the opening scenes, the editing establishes a calm tempo. Shots linger longer than typical action thrillers. We see McCall waking up, preparing tea, organizing his apartment, and reading alone at the diner. These moments are not rushed. The editors allow space between actions. This breathing room builds character understanding and creates a sense of routine. By taking time early on, the film earns the audience's investment before raising the stakes. One of the most important editing techniques used in the film is contrast. Quiet scenes are cut slowly, while action scenes become sharper and more precise. When McCall decides to confront Slavy and his men, the editing shifts noticeably. The build-up to violence includes tight close-ups of objects in the room. The camera shows bottles, corkscrews, tables, and exits. Each quick insert shot is carefully placed. The rhythm tightens, but it never becomes confusing. The audience understands that McCall is planning. During the fight itself, the editing becomes faster, yet remains clear. Unlike many action films that rely on rapid, disorienting cuts, The Equalizer maintains spatial awareness. Viewers can follow each movement. Each strike and reaction is visible. This clarity strengthens the impact of the violence. The goal is not to overwhelm but to demonstrate precision. The editing mirrors McCall's calculated mindset. Another important pacing choice is the film's willingness to slow down after intense sequences. After major confrontations, the story returns to quiet moments. McCall goes back to work. He checks on Ralphie. He sits alone. These transitions prevent emotional exhaustion. The audience has time to process what happened. This up-and-down rhythm creates balance. Instead of constant adrenaline, the film provides controlled escalation. The middle portion of the film continues this steady build. Scenes between Teddy and his associates are paced with deliberate tension. Conversations are not cut abruptly. The editors allow pauses and silences to linger. These pauses create discomfort and psychological suspense. The film understands that tension often comes from anticipation rather than action. Parallel editing also plays a key role. As McCall dismantles the Russian operation, the film cuts between his actions and Teddy's investigation. This cross-cutting builds a cat-and-mouse dynamic. The audience sees both sides moving closer to confrontation. The timing of these cuts maintains suspense without revealing too much too soon. The final act inside Home Mart showcases some of the film's strongest editing work. The pacing gradually tightens as the showdown approaches. Quick insert shots of tools and materials signal preparation. Once the fight begins, the cuts become sharper but remain controlled. The editors avoid excessive motion blur or shaky transitions. Every action is purposeful. The clarity of the sequence allows viewers to experience strategy rather than chaos. Sound and editing also work together. Moments of silence are used effectively before bursts of violence. The absence of music during certain confrontations heightens realism. The editors allow tension to build through quiet rather than constant scoring. Importantly, the overall pacing respects character development. At over 2 hours, the film does not feel rushed. The steady progression supports the emotional arc. McCall's transformation unfolds naturally. The editing gives space for his internal conflict to surface without heavy exposition. Some viewers may find the pacing slower compared to typical action blockbusters. However, this deliberate tempo is intentional. The film prioritizes atmosphere and psychological buildup over non-stop spectacle. In summary, the editing and pacing of The Equalizer reflect discipline and control. Through careful rhythm, clear action sequencing, strategic pauses, and balanced escalation, the film maintains suspense without sacrificing coherence. The result is a thriller that feels mature, grounded, and methodically crafted from start to finish. Sound plays a powerful but often subtle role in The Equalizer. While the film is known for its intense action scenes, the sound design and musical score work quietly beneath the surface to build tension, emotion, and psychological depth. Composed by Harry Gregson Williams, the score blends orchestral elements with electronic textures, creating a mood that feels modern, controlled, and slightly haunting. At the same time, the sound design enhances realism, making every movement, impact, and silence meaningful. One of the most important aspects of the film's sound design is restraint. Just like the cinematography and editing, the audio choices reflect Robert McCall's personality. The movie does not overload scenes with loud, continuous music. Instead, it often uses silence or minimal background sound to increase tension. In many early scenes, we hear simple environmental noises, the hum of store lights, the quiet clink of dishes in the diner, the soft sound of pages turning as McCall reads. These everyday sounds ground the film in reality. Harry Gregson Williams' score is carefully layered. It does not dominate scenes but subtly supports them. Low, pulsing electronic tones are frequently used during moments of tension. These deep sounds create unease without distracting from the action. The music often feels like a heartbeat beneath the surface, steady and controlled. This mirrors McCall's calm exterior and disciplined mindset. During action sequences, the score intensifies but remains structured. It avoids overly dramatic melodies. Instead, it uses rhythm and atmosphere to drive momentum. In the first major confrontation with Slavi and his men, the music builds slowly as McCall observes the room. When the violence begins, the sound shifts sharply, but it never becomes chaotic. The combination of precise editing and controlled scoring reinforces the idea that McCall operates with strategy, not rage. Silence is another key tool in the film's audio design. Before several violent moments, the music drops away entirely. This creates a sudden stillness that heightens suspense. When McCall times himself before attacking, the absence of heavy music forces the audience to focus on small sounds, such as breathing or footsteps. This technique increases tension because viewers anticipate what is about to happen. The sound effects themselves are sharp and realistic. Punches, impacts, and breaking objects are emphasized with clarity. The film does not exaggerate these sounds in an unrealistic way, but it ensures they carry weight. When McCall uses everyday objects as weapons, each impact feels heavy and final. The audio design enhances the brutality without turning it into spectacle. Dialogue is mixed clearly and deliberately. Conversations, especially between McCall and Alina, are soft and intimate. Their late-night diner talks feel personal because the background noise is kept subtle. This allows emotional connection to stand out. In contrast, scenes involving Teddy and the Russian mob often include echoing spaces or harsher ambient sounds. These subtle differences help define character environments. The score also shifts slightly in emotional tone depending on context. Scenes focused on mentorship or reflection use softer, more restrained musical elements. The music never becomes overly sentimental. Instead, it remains serious and grounded, matching the film's overall tone. Even moments of hope are presented with caution. In the final home mart sequence, sound design becomes especially important. The metallic clanging of tools, the hiss of sprinklers, and the crackle of electricity create a layered audio environment. These sounds blend with the score to create immersion. The environment feels alive and dangerous. Each echo in the empty store adds tension. Overall, the sound design and music in The Equalizer are carefully controlled. They support the film's themes of discipline, precision, and moral weight. Rather than overwhelming the audience, the audio elements guide emotion quietly and effectively. By combining subtle scoring, strategic silence, realistic sound effects, and clear dialogue mixing, the film creates an immersive and tense atmosphere. The audio never distracts from performance or story. Instead, it strengthens every scene with intention and restraint, reinforcing the controlled intensity that defines The Equalizer from beginning to end. The production design of The Equalizer plays a major role in grounding the film's story in realism. Designed to reflect ordinary urban life, the sets and locations create a believable world where extraordinary violence can suddenly erupt. Rather than building flashy or exaggerated environments, the film uses practical, lived-in spaces that feel authentic. This choice strengthens the emotional impact because the danger unfolds in places that look familiar. The movie is set primarily in Boston, Massachusetts, and much of the filming took place in real neighborhoods around the city. Streets, apartment buildings, diners, and industrial areas all contribute to a realistic atmosphere. The decision to use practical locations instead of overly stylized studio sets adds texture and depth. Viewers feel like this story could happen in any major American city. One of the most important locations is the Home Mart store, where Robert McCall works. The store represents normalcy and routine. It is brightly lit, organized, and structured. Aisles are neatly arranged with tools, paint supplies, and hardware. This setting symbolizes McCall's attempt at a simple life. The production design team made sure the store felt authentic, like a real retail space rather than a movie set. Every shelf is stocked. Every section looks functional. When the final confrontation takes place inside Home Mart, the store transforms from a symbol of peace into a battlefield. The same tools that represent construction and repair become weapons. The layout of the store, with narrow aisles and tall shelves, creates tension and confinement. The sprinklers, power tools, and industrial equipment are all integrated into the action naturally. This transformation works because the space was designed realistically from the start. McCall's apartment is another key set. It is simple, clean, and minimal. There are no unnecessary decorations. The furniture is functional. The space reflects discipline and control. Everything appears organized. This design choice mirrors McCall's personality. He lives quietly and without excess. The apartment feels like a temporary refuge rather than a permanent home, suggesting that he is not fully settled emotionally. In contrast, the locations associated with the Russian mob feel darker and more chaotic. Nightclubs, back offices, and hidden rooms are dimly lit and cluttered. These spaces carry a sense of danger. The nightclub where Alina works is filled with harsh lighting and shadowed corners. The environment feels suffocating. The The production design emphasizes discomfort and exploitation without exaggeration. The diner where McCall spends his late nights serves as a neutral, almost safe space. It is softly lit and calm. Booths and counters are arranged in a classic American style. This location becomes a place for quiet conversations between McCall and Alina. The warmth of the diner contrasts with the coldness of other environments. This subtle difference supports the emotional tone of those scenes. Attention to detail is visible throughout the film. Background elements, such as street signs, storefronts, and vehicles, all feel authentic. Nothing appears overly polished. The world looks slightly worn, reflecting economic and social reality. This lived-in quality makes the story feel grounded. Costume design also contributes to the production atmosphere. McCall wears simple, practical clothing. Neutral colors dominate his wardrobe. He blends into his environment. Teddy, on the other hand, often appears in darker, sharper outfits that reflect control and menace. These costume choices align with character identity without drawing unnecessary attention. Industrial locations used in various confrontations, including warehouses and docks, are presented without glamour. They feel cold and utilitarian. These environments enhance tension because they are isolated and harsh. Overall, the production design of The Equalizer supports the film's serious tone. By using realistic sets and authentic locations, the movie creates immersion. The ordinary settings make the violence more shocking and impactful. The careful design of Home Mart, McCall's apartment, the diner, and the criminal spaces reinforces theme and character. Each environment reflects identity, morality, or transformation. Through grounded and detailed production work, the film builds a world that feels believable, cohesive, and emotionally effective from beginning to end. The Equalizer stands out in the modern action genre because it relies more on practical effects than heavy computer-generated imagery. The film's approach to visual effects is grounded, restrained, and realistic. Instead of overwhelming the audience with large-scale digital destruction, the movie focuses on enhancing physical action in subtle ways. This choice aligns with the story's serious tone and Robert McCall's controlled personality. One of the defining features of the film's action sequences is their physical authenticity. Most fight scenes were choreographed and performed using practical stunt work. Denzel Washington trained extensively to make McCall's movements appear precise and believable. The punches, strikes, and weapon use feel direct and immediate because they are grounded in real physical performance rather than exaggerated digital enhancement. Practical effects are especially noticeable in close-quarters combat. When McCall uses everyday objects as weapons, such as corkscrews, nail guns, or pieces of hardware, the impact is emphasized through practical props and controlled stunt coordination. Blood effects, broken furniture, and shattered glass are executed physically on set whenever possible. This adds weight and realism. The audience can sense the texture and force of each interaction. Digital visual effects are present in the film, but they are used mainly for enhancement rather than spectacle. For example, certain gunshots, muzzle flashes, and environmental adjustments are refined digitally to ensure safety and visual clarity. However, these effects are subtle. They are not designed to draw attention to themselves. The goal is seamless integration. One of the most stylistic elements of the film is the use of time-slowing sequences during McCall's preparation for violence. In these moments, the camera isolates objects and movements while sound and pacing shift. Although this effect is partly achieved through editing and cinematography, visual effects help smooth transitions and enhance small environmental details. The result is a heightened perception of McCall's strategic thinking without turning the scene into fantasy. The final confrontation inside Home Mart demonstrates a careful blend of practical and digital techniques. Sparks from electrical wires, water from sprinklers, and small explosions are largely created with practical setups. These physical elements create a tactile environment. Digital tools are then used to enhance lighting, remove safety equipment, or refine visual continuity. The balance between real and digital keeps the action immersive. Another important aspect is restraint in large-scale destruction. Unlike many action films that rely on collapsing buildings or massive explosions, The Equalizer keeps its violence contained within believable limits. Rooms are damaged, tools are broken, furniture is destroyed, but the scale remains personal. This reinforces the grounded nature of the story. Makeup effects also contribute to realism. Bruises, cuts, and blood are applied carefully to reflect consequences of violence. Injuries look painful and authentic rather than exaggerated. This attention to detail supports the film's serious tone. Violence has impact and cost. Lighting effects, such as flickering bulbs and sparks, are often created practically on set. These environmental effects add tension and atmosphere. Digital technology then enhances them subtly, ensuring they appear natural on screen. The film avoids flashy CGI creatures or impossible physics. McCall's abilities, while impressive, remain within the limits of human capability. His precision comes from training and awareness, not superhuman powers. The effects support this grounded portrayal. Overall, the visual effects and practical effects in The Equalizer serve the story rather than overshadow it. By prioritizing physical stunt work and realistic environmental damage, the film maintains credibility. Digital enhancements are used carefully to polish and refine, not dominate. This restrained approach strengthens immersion. The audience believes in the world because it feels tangible. Every broken object, every spark, and every impact appears connected to the physical space. Through disciplined integration of practical craftsmanship and subtle digital support, The Equalizer delivers action that feels intense, controlled, and believable from beginning to end. The screenplay of The Equalizer, written by Richard Wenk, is built on restraint, structure, and character-driven tension. Unlike many action films that depend on constant witty one-liners or long speeches, this script values silence as much as dialogue. The writing supports the personality of Robert McCall by making his words deliberate, controlled, and purposeful. Every line serves a function, either revealing character, building tension, or advancing the moral themes of the story. One of the most noticeable elements of the screenplay is its economy of words. Robert McCall does not talk excessively. He speaks when necessary. His sentences are short and calm. This minimalism makes his dialogue more powerful. When he makes a promise or delivers a warning, it carries weight because he rarely wastes language. The script understands that intimidation does not require shouting. It requires certainty. The early diner conversations between McCall and Alina demonstrate the screenplay's subtlety. Their exchanges feel natural and human. They discuss books, dreams, and identity. The dialogue avoids heavy exposition. Instead of directly explaining McCall's past, the script allows hints to surface through tone and small details. Alina's lines reveal vulnerability without melodrama. She speaks like a young woman trying to appear stronger than she feels. These scenes ground the story emotionally before the violence begins. When McCall confronts Slavi and his men, the dialogue shifts into a different rhythm. His offer to buy Alina's freedom is delivered calmly, almost politely. The contrast between his soft tone and the threat beneath it creates tension. The gangsters laugh at him, misunderstanding his seriousness. The writing carefully builds this misunderstanding to make the sudden violence feel shocking but justified within the narrative. Teddy's dialogue, in contrast, reflects manipulation and psychological control. He speaks in composed, almost friendly tones while delivering threats. His words are precise, often layered with sarcasm. The screenplay uses his language to show his belief in hierarchy and power. Unlike McCall, Teddy talks more, attempting to dominate conversations. This difference highlights their contrasting personalities. Another important aspect of the screenplay is its use of moral framing. McCall often gives people opportunities to choose differently. His warnings are clear. He states consequences calmly. The dialogue reinforces his code. He does not act without offering a chance. This pattern appears multiple times, establishing consistency in his behavior. The script also avoids unnecessary backstory explanations. We are not given long flashbacks or detailed descriptions of McCall's former life. Instead, small references from Brian and Susan hint at his past. This restraint keeps the mystery intact while providing enough context for credibility. Supporting characters are given functional but meaningful dialogue. Ralphie's conversations reflect insecurity and ambition. His lines feel simple and realistic. The Russian mob members speak in a way that reflects authority and threat without becoming exaggerated stereotypes. The pacing of dialogue scenes is also important. Pauses and silence are written into the structure. Characters often respond slowly, allowing tension to build between lines. This deliberate spacing supports the film's controlled tone. One of the screenplay's strengths is its consistency. The tone never shifts into comedy or exaggerated drama. Even intense confrontations remain serious and grounded. The writing respects the film's mature atmosphere. Overall, the dialogue in The Equalizer is restrained, purposeful, and aligned with character psychology. It avoids excess while maintaining tension. The screenplay builds identity through speech patterns and silence rather than heavy exposition. By focusing on minimal but meaningful language, Richard Wenk creates a script that supports performance, pacing, and theme. The result is dialogue that feels realistic, controlled, and powerful without needing to be loud or overly dramatic. The Equalizer operates primarily within the action thriller genre, but its execution is more disciplined and character-focused than many standard entries in that category. While it contains brutal fight sequences and high-stakes confrontations, the film approaches the genre with restraint, psychological tension, and moral seriousness. Instead of relying purely on spectacle, it blends elements of crime drama, vigilante justice, and slow-burn suspense to create a more layered experience. At its core, The Equalizer is a vigilante story. The structure follows a familiar pattern. A quiet man with hidden skills steps in to protect the innocent from powerful criminals. However, the film avoids exaggerated heroics or comic book-style fantasy. Robert McCall is not portrayed as invincible. His strength comes from preparation, awareness, and discipline. This grounded execution separates the movie from more explosive action franchises. The thriller aspect is carefully developed through pacing and tone. Much of the tension comes from anticipation rather than immediate action. McCall often observes his surroundings before engaging. The camera and editing support this measured buildup. This approach transforms standard action beats into psychological chess matches. The genre conventions are present, but they are handled with patience and calculation. Tone is one of the film's strongest components. From beginning to end, the atmosphere remains serious and controlled. There are no sudden comedic detours or dramatic tonal whiplash. Even moments of warmth, such as McCall's interactions with Alina or Ralphie, are understated. The film maintains emotional consistency. This steady tone reinforces the weight of its themes. The violence in The Equalizer is intense, but it is never stylized for entertainment alone. Each confrontation feels purposeful. The brutality is direct and sometimes uncomfortable. This grounded portrayal prevents the film from becoming cartoonish. The genre execution emphasizes consequence. Actions have impact. Injuries are visible. The tone never celebrates violence in a playful way. There are subtle tonal shifts throughout the film, but they are gradual rather than abrupt. The opening act feels almost meditative. The quiet routine of McCall's life creates a calm atmosphere. When the inciting incident occurs, the tone darkens slowly. The shift from peaceful routine to controlled aggression happens step by step. This gradual transition makes the escalation believable. As the story progresses, tension increases without losing composure. The middle section feels like a strategic dismantling of the criminal network. The tone remains calculated. Even when Teddy intensifies his pursuit, the atmosphere does not become chaotic. The film resists the temptation to turn into non-stop action. The final act introduces a heightened level of intensity during the home-mark confrontation. However, even this sequence maintains structure. The setting is industrial and harsh, but the execution remains disciplined. The tone never crosses into exaggerated spectacle. Instead, it concludes with a sense of inevitability. Genre blending also contributes to the film's uniqueness. While it fits within action thriller boundaries, it incorporates elements of character drama. McCall's internal conflict and moral code add emotional weight. The crime elements are grounded in organized corruption rather than fantasy villains. Overall, The Equalizer executes its genre with maturity and focus. It respects action conventions but refines them through restraint and character depth. The tone remains consistent, serious, and intentional. By maintaining psychological tension, grounded violence, and disciplined pacing, the film elevates itself beyond standard action fare. Its careful handling of genre expectations results in a thriller that feels controlled, immersive, and emotionally grounded from start to finish. At its surface, The Equalizer appears to be a straightforward vigilante action film. However, beneath the violence and suspense, the story explores deeper themes about justice, identity, redemption, discipline, and moral responsibility. These themes give the film emotional weight and separate it from standard action thrillers. The movie is not simply about defeating criminals. It is about a man confronting who he truly is and deciding how his skills should be used. The central theme of the film is justice versus revenge. Robert McCall does not act out of personal anger. He is not seeking revenge for a wrong done to him. Instead, he steps in when he sees injustice against others, especially those who cannot defend themselves. When Alina is beaten and exploited, McCall feels morally obligated to intervene. His actions are driven by principle, not emotion. The film repeatedly shows him offering people a chance to choose a better path before he uses force. This reinforces that his goal is balance, not vengeance. Closely connected to justice is the theme of moral responsibility. McCall possesses highly specialized skills that make him capable of extreme violence. The question the film raises is simple but powerful. If you have the ability to stop evil, do you have a duty to act? McCall initially tries to live quietly, avoiding involvement. But when confronted with cruelty, he cannot ignore it. The story suggests that responsibility comes with capability. McCall's return to action is framed as a moral decision rather than a personal desire. Another major theme is identity. Throughout the film, McCall attempts to redefine himself as an ordinary citizen. He works at Hallmark. He follows routines. He reads books about self-improvement. These habits represent his effort to build a new life separate from his past. However, his past skills never disappear. The tension of the story lies in whether he can truly escape who he once was. By the end, McCall does not reject his identity. Instead, he integrates it into a new purpose. He becomes someone who uses his past for protection rather than destruction. Redemption is also central to the narrative. McCall's quiet life suggests that he may carry guilt or regret. Although the film never fully explains his history, there is a sense that he is seeking atonement. His actions to protect Alina and dismantle the criminal network function as a form of redemption. He cannot undo his past, but he can shape his present choices. Discipline and control are recurring thematic elements. McCall's routines, timed actions, and calm demeanor represent mastery over chaos. In contrast, the criminals operate through fear and disorder. The film presents discipline as strength and impulsiveness as weakness. Even during violent confrontations, McCall remains emotionally stable. This contrast reinforces the message that true power comes from control rather than aggression. The theme of empowerment also appears in smaller character arcs. Ralphie's journey to improve his physical fitness mirrors McCall's belief in self-betterment. McCall encourages growth and confidence in others. His mentorship reflects the idea that strength can be constructive. Finally, the film touches on systemic corruption. Law enforcement officials connected to the Russian mob show that injustice can exist within institutions. McCall operates outside the system because the system fails to protect the vulnerable. This theme adds social depth to the narrative. In conclusion, The Equalizer explores justice, responsibility, identity, redemption, discipline, and empowerment. These themes elevate the story beyond simple action. The film argues that strength should serve protection, that identity cannot be erased, and that moral responsibility demands action when others suffer. Through Robert McCall's choices, the movie delivers a message about using power with purpose and control. While The Equalizer functions clearly as a grounded action thriller, It also carries layers of symbolism that deepen its narrative. Many visual elements, repeated behaviors, and environmental details reflect Robert McCall's internal conflict and the film's broader themes about balance, justice, and identity. These symbolic choices are subtle rather than obvious, but they strengthen the story's meaning. One of the strongest symbols in the film is time. McCall frequently times himself during confrontations. Before engaging in violence, he sets his watch and calculates how long it will take to neutralize threats. On the surface, this shows skill and preparation. Symbolically, it represents control. Time becomes a metaphor for mastery. McCall does not act impulsively. He measures, predicts, and executes. The act of timing himself also reflects his desire to impose order on chaos. In a world filled with unpredictable cruelty, he creates structure. Books serve as another important symbol. McCall spends nights reading classic literature at the diner. He works through a list of 100 books everyone should read. These books symbolize self-improvement and intellectual growth. They represent his effort to evolve beyond his violent past. Literature becomes a form of discipline and reflection. It also contrasts with the brutality around him. While criminals rely on force, McCall values knowledge and thought. The Home Art store carries symbolic meaning as well. It represents construction, repair, and rebuilding. McCall works in a place designed to fix broken things. This setting mirrors his personal journey. He is trying to repair himself. In the final act, when the store becomes a battleground, the symbolism deepens. Tools meant for building are turned into weapons. This reflects McCall's dual identity. He can build or destroy, depending on necessity. Water appears subtly throughout the film, especially during the final confrontation when sprinklers activate. Water often symbolizes cleansing or renewal. In that scene, as McCall eliminates his enemies, the falling water creates a visual sense of purification. It suggests that his violent actions are part of restoring balance rather than causing chaos. Light and shadow are also symbolic elements. McCall is frequently framed partially in darkness. This visual choice reflects the hidden aspects of his past. He operates in the shadows, both literally and morally. In contrast, scenes in the diner often feel warmer and brighter, symbolizing humanity and connection. The contrast between light and dark reinforces internal conflict. The character of Alina symbolizes innocence trapped within corruption. She represents the vulnerable people McCall feels compelled to protect. Her presence triggers his return to action. On a deeper level, she may symbolize McCall's own lost innocence or the life he wishes he could have lived. Saving her becomes symbolic of saving something pure within himself. Teddy, the antagonist, symbolizes rigid hierarchy and institutional cruelty. He believes in order, but his order is built on fear and exploitation. In contrast, McCall's sense of order is rooted in fairness. The conflict between them represents two opposing philosophies of control. Even small objects carry meaning. Everyday items like corkscrews, nail guns, and hardware tools become weapons in McCall's hands. This transformation suggests that power does not depend on specialized tools but on discipline and intention. Ordinary objects can become instruments of justice when guided by purpose. Overall, the symbolism in the Equalizer reinforces its themes of balance, identity, and responsibility. Through timepieces, books, environments, light, and objects, the film communicates deeper meaning without explicit explanation. These hidden layers enrich the narrative and elevate the story beyond simple action. While The Equalizer presents itself as a personal story about justice, it also contains clear social and cultural commentary beneath its action-driven surface. The film reflects concerns about systemic corruption, exploitation, class imbalance, institutional failure, and the idea of individual intervention in a flawed system. These themes are not delivered through speeches or overt political statements. Instead, they are woven into the world and character dynamics. One of the strongest social commentaries in the film centers on exploitation and human trafficking. Alina's situation highlights the vulnerability of young people trapped in criminal systems. She is not portrayed as someone who chose her life freely. Instead, she is controlled, abused, and financially exploited by organized crime. The film presents her condition as part of a larger network of systemic abuse. This reflects real-world concerns about trafficking and forced labor. By making her character sympathetic and human, the film reminds viewers that victims often exist in plain sight. The movie also addresses institutional corruption. Several law enforcement figures are shown cooperating with the Russian mob. This suggests that corruption can exist inside official systems. The presence of compromised authorities implies that justice cannot always rely on institutions. McCall operates outside the legal framework because the system has failed to protect the innocent. This idea touches on the broader debate about vigilante justice. The film does not fully endorse or reject this concept, but it raises the question of what happens when formal structures collapse. Class and economic imbalance are subtly present throughout the film. McCall works in a retail hardware store, surrounded by everyday workers struggling with ordinary problems. Ralphie wants to join the police force but struggles with physical and financial limitations. These details reflect working-class realities. In contrast, the criminal organization moves large sums of money and exerts power through fear. The divide between everyday labor and organized crime highlights economic disparity. The setting of Boston's neighborhoods reinforces social realism. The film does not present a glamorous urban environment. Instead, it shows modest apartments, industrial zones, and dimly lit streets. This grounded environment reflects the idea that crime and exploitation are not distant or abstract. They exist within normal communities. The Russian mafia element introduces cultural commentary about global crime networks operating within American cities. While the film avoids deep geopolitical analysis, it acknowledges the presence of international organized crime. This reflects real concerns about transnational criminal systems that operate across borders. There is also commentary about masculinity and control. McCall's strength is defined by discipline rather than aggression. He does not dominate through loud behavior. Instead, he demonstrates quiet authority. This contrasts with Teddy's more psychological intimidation style. The film suggests that real power comes from restraint and responsibility, not cruelty. Another cultural theme is self-improvement and personal accountability. McCall encourages Ralphie to train harder and believe in himself. This mentorship reflects the American cultural emphasis on self-betterment. It suggests that strength can be developed through effort and discipline. Finally, the film indirectly comments on moral intervention. McCall chooses to act when others remain silent. This raises questions about civic responsibility. Should individuals step in when they witness injustice? The movie portrays McCall's intervention as necessary because formal systems have failed. In conclusion, The Equalizer contains layered social and cultural commentary about exploitation, corruption, class imbalance, institutional failure, masculinity, and personal responsibility. These elements deepen the narrative without turning it into a political lecture. By grounding its action within real social concerns, the film creates relevance beyond entertainment. The Equalizer is structured around several powerful scenes that define its tone, character, and emotional impact. These moments are not memorable simply because of violence. They stand out because of buildup, tension, and the psychological weight behind each action. The film carefully constructs these sequences so that when they arrive, they feel earned rather than random. One of the earliest impactful scenes takes place in the diner between Robert McCall and Alina. Their quiet conversations may not seem dramatic at first, but they establish emotional grounding. McCall listens more than he speaks. Alina talks about wanting to be a singer and about the life she feels trapped in. The scene becomes powerful because of its restraint. There are no dramatic speeches. Instead, the connection forms through simple dialogue and eye contact. This emotional foundation makes everything that follows more meaningful. The first major confrontation in Slavy's office is arguably the film's most shocking early moment. McCall enters calmly and offers money to buy Alina's freedom. The gangsters mock him, assuming he is weak. Then McCall quietly sets his watch. This small action instantly changes the atmosphere. The room becomes silent. What follows is a precise and brutal elimination of multiple armed men within seconds. The The scene is memorable because of contrast. The shift from calm negotiation to controlled violence is sudden but calculated. Another powerful scene involves McCall confronting corrupt police officers connected to the Russian mob. Instead of immediately attacking them, he uses psychological pressure. He exposes their corruption and forces them to reconsider their position. This scene demonstrates that McCall's strength is not only physical. His intelligence and moral clarity are equally intimidating. The impact comes from quiet authority rather than aggression. The sequence where Teddy begins to understand who McCall truly is also memorable. As Teddy investigates, he slowly realizes that he is not facing an ordinary opponent. The tension in these scenes builds through dialogue and atmosphere. Teddy's confidence begins to crack. These moments are impactful because they reverse expectations. The hunter starts to fear the prey. One of the most emotionally charged scenes occurs when Teddy threatens people connected to McCall's daily life. This escalation raises personal stakes. Until this point, McCall operates strategically and at a distance. When his quiet world is invaded, the threat feels immediate. The emotional tension increases because the violence now affects innocent bystanders. The final home-mart showdown stands as the film's most visually and structurally memorable sequence. The location itself is symbolic. A place of construction becomes a battlefield. McCall prepares the environment using tools and materials. The sprinklers activate, sparks fly, and shadows fill the aisles. Each confrontation inside the store feels like part of a larger strategy. The scene is impactful because it combines preparation, symbolism, and physical intensity. The final confrontation between McCall and Teddy is quieter than expected. Instead of a loud explosion, the ending focuses on personal accountability. McCall offers Teddy a choice, just as he does with others. The tension comes from the moral weight of that choice. When the outcome arrives, it feels inevitable rather than dramatic. Finally, the closing scene where McCall begins responding to online requests for help is subtle but powerful. It signals his full acceptance of his role as an equalizer. The film ends not with chaos, but with purpose. These scenes remain memorable because they are built on character and tension rather than spectacle alone. Each impactful moment reflects discipline, morality, and identity. The film's strongest sequences combine emotional grounding with controlled intensity, making them resonate beyond simple action thrills. The Equalizer fits within a recognizable tradition of vigilante action films, but it distinguishes itself through tone, pacing, and character depth. When compared to similar movies in the genre, its differences become clear. It shares structural similarities with other revenge-driven stories, yet its execution is more controlled and psychologically grounded. One obvious comparison is with the John Wick series. Both films feature a quiet, highly trained man with a mysterious past who returns to violence after a triggering event. Both characters operate with precision and discipline. However, the tone between the two franchises differs significantly. John Wick embraces stylized world-building, elaborate criminal codes, and high-energy choreography. The Equalizer, on the other hand, remains grounded in realism. Its violence feels heavier and more personal. The world of Robert McCall is not built around secret assassin networks. It is rooted in everyday urban life. Another comparison can be made with Taken, starring Liam Neeson. Like McCall, Neeson's character uses specialized skills to rescue someone from criminal forces. Both films involve international organized crime. However, Taken focuses more on speed and urgency, while The Equalizer invests more time in character development. McCall is portrayed as introspective and reflective. His journey emphasizes moral responsibility rather than parental revenge. The film also draws parallels to Man on Fire, another movie starring Denzel Washington. In that film, Washington plays a former operative who protects a young girl and ultimately seeks revenge when she is harmed. Both films explore themes of redemption and protection. However, Man on Fire leans more heavily into emotional intensity and stylistic visuals. The Equalizer maintains a steadier and more controlled tone throughout. Looking at Antoine Fuqua's previous work, especially Training Day, similarities become more apparent. Both films explore moral ambiguity and power. Training Day focuses on corruption within law enforcement, while The Equalizer examines justice outside the system. In both films, Fuqua emphasizes tension through dialogue and performance rather than constant action. Denzel Washington's presence in both projects strengthens this comparison, though his roles are dramatically different. The Equalizer also echoes classic vigilante films such as Death Wish. In Death Wish, an ordinary man becomes a vigilante after personal tragedy. The Equalizer modernizes this concept by presenting a protagonist who is not ordinary but highly trained. Unlike the chaotic violence in older vigilante films, McCall operates with strict moral guidelines. This evolution reflects changing audience expectations. Compared to superhero films, The Equalizer feels grounded and realistic. McCall has no superhuman abilities. His effectiveness comes from discipline and experience. The movie avoids fantasy elements and instead focuses on believable environments and consequences. Overall, The Equalizer stands within the vigilante tradition but distinguishes itself through restraint, psychological depth, and character focus. While it shares themes with John Wick, Taken, Man on Fire, and Death Wish, its grounded tone and measured pacing create a unique identity. Through Antoine Fuqua's direction and Denzel Washington's performance, the film avoids becoming just another action thriller. Instead, it becomes a disciplined and morally centered story about responsibility and balance. The ending of The Equalizer brings the story full circle, not through spectacle alone, but through identity and purpose. On the surface, the final act appears to be a straightforward showdown between Robert McCall and the remaining forces of the Russian mob. However, when examined more closely, the conclusion represents McCall's full acceptance of who he is and what he believes his role in the world should be. The climax takes place inside Home Mart, the hardware store where McCall has been working quietly throughout the film. This location is not random. It symbolizes the life he tried to build after leaving his violent past behind. It represents routine, discipline, and simplicity. When the Russian enforcers arrive to eliminate him, that peaceful space is invaded. The store transforms into a battleground, reflecting the collapse of the separation between McCall's old life and new identity. Before the final confrontation, McCall methodically prepares the environment. He studies the layout, adjusts tools, and activates systems within the store. This preparation reinforces the idea that he does not act recklessly. Even at the story's highest point of tension, he remains calm and strategic. The sprinklers release water, sparks fly from exposed wires, and the aisles become narrow corridors of danger. Symbolically, the water can be interpreted as a cleansing element, suggesting purification through confrontation. Each opponent is eliminated one by one. The sequence is structured like a controlled operation rather than chaotic combat. McCall uses everyday objects as weapons, turning tools of construction into instruments of destruction. This duality mirrors his character. He is capable of building or destroying, depending on the moral need. The final confrontation between McCall and Teddy is surprisingly quiet compared to earlier violence. There is no exaggerated monologue or dramatic explosion. Instead, the tension comes from psychological confrontation. Teddy, who has spent the film projecting control and intimidation, now faces someone he underestimated. McCall gives him a moment to understand what is happening. As in previous encounters, McCall offers a form of choice, even if it is limited. When McCall ultimately defeats Teddy, the act feels less like revenge and more like the restoration of balance. Teddy represents systemic cruelty and exploitation. By eliminating him, McCall dismantles the immediate threat to the innocent. However, the film does not present this as a permanent solution to crime. It presents it as one correction in a larger, ongoing imbalance. After the violence ends, the film shifts tone again. The pace slows. McCall returns to quiet spaces. The final scenes show him sitting at his computer, responding to online posts from people seeking help. This moment is critical. It signals that McCall has fully embraced the identity of the Equalizer. He is no longer pretending to live an ordinary life detached from injustice. Instead, he chooses to act deliberately when needed. The ending suggests that McCall has integrated his past with his present. He no longer sees his skills as something to hide. Instead, he sees them as tools for protection. The transformation is not about becoming more violent. It is about clarity. He understands his purpose. On a deeper level, the film's ending reinforces its core message about responsibility. McCall possesses unique abilities. The story argues that ignoring injustice would be a failure of moral duty. By accepting his role, he aligns action with principle. In conclusion, the ending of The Equalizer is not just a physical victory. It is a philosophical resolution. McCall accepts who he is and chooses to use his skills to restore balance where the system fails. The quiet final image reflects control, purpose, and a disciplined sense of justice. The Equalizer was produced with a reported budget of approximately $55 million. For a major studio action thriller led by an Academy Award-winning actor, this budget was moderate rather than massive. It did not rely on large-scale CGI destruction or exotic international locations, which helped control production costs. Much of the filming took place in Massachusetts, particularly in and around Boston, using practical locations instead of expensive built environments. This grounded production strategy allowed the filmmakers to invest more in performance, choreography, and controlled action rather than spectacle-driven visuals. When the film was released in the United States on September 26, 2014, it entered a competitive box office environment. However, the presence of Denzel Washington in a serious action role generated significant anticipation. Marketing campaigns emphasized his return to a morally complex, physically capable character, which appealed to both longtime fans and new audiences. The trailers highlighted tension, precision, and calculated violence rather than explosive chaos, positioning the film as a mature thriller rather than a generic action release. During its opening weekend in North America, The Equalizer debuted at number 1 at the box office. It earned strong initial numbers, demonstrating that audiences were eager to see Washington in this role. The performance confirmed that star power combined with a recognizable concept could draw attention even without a superhero label or franchise branding at the time. Over its full theatrical run, the film earned more than $190 million worldwide. This total significantly exceeded its production budget, making it a clear commercial success. For a film that was not based on an active franchise but rather a reboot of an older television property, this financial performance was especially impressive. It demonstrated that grounded, adult-oriented action films could still attract wide audiences in a marketplace increasingly dominated by comic book adaptations and fantasy blockbusters. International markets also responded positively. While domestic earnings formed a large portion of the total, overseas performance contributed meaningfully to the film's overall profitability. The global box office numbers confirmed that the themes of justice and protection resonated beyond American audiences. Critical reception for The Equalizer was mixed to positive. Many critics praised Denzel Washington's performance, highlighting his quiet intensity and disciplined screen presence. Reviewers often noted that Washington elevated the material through subtle acting choices. His portrayal of Robert McCall was seen as controlled and deliberate, giving emotional weight to scenes that could have otherwise felt routine. Antoine Fuqua's direction also received recognition for its grounded tone. Critics appreciated the film's commitment to realism and restraint. The action sequences were frequently described as precise and impactful rather than chaotic. However, some reviewers felt that the pacing was slower than typical action thrillers. While many viewers appreciated the deliberate build-up, others expected a faster tempo. Audience reception was generally strong. Moviegoers responded positively to the character-driven approach and intense set pieces. Word of mouth helped sustain box office performance after the opening weekend. The film's success ultimately led to the development of sequels, confirming its commercial viability as a franchise. Award recognition for The Equalizer was limited, as it was primarily viewed as a genre film rather than awards-focused drama. However, the movie strengthened Denzel Washington's reputation as an actor capable of balancing depth with physical intensity. In summary, The Equalizer was produced with a moderate budget, achieved significant box office success, and received generally favorable audience reactions. Its financial performance proved that serious, grounded action films led by strong performances could compete in a market filled with large-scale franchise spectacles. The movie's commercial success laid the foundation for sequels and established Robert McCall as a modern action icon. The Equalizer is the type of film that offers strong rewatch value, not only because of its action sequences, but because of its layered character work and disciplined storytelling. Many action thrillers lose impact once the surprise of the plot is gone. However, this film gains depth when revisited. On a second or third viewing, viewers often notice subtle details in performance, pacing, symbolism, and dialogue that may have been overlooked the first time. One reason for its rewatch value is the precision of Robert McCall's actions. During the first viewing, audiences may focus primarily on the intensity of the confrontations. On repeat viewings, attention shifts to the preparation. Small glances, environmental observations, and timing cues become more noticeable. The way McCall studies a room before acting reveals layers of strategy. These moments feel more meaningful when the viewer already knows the outcome. The film's pacing also benefits from repeat viewing. Some audiences initially describe the movie as slow compared to typical action films. However, on rewatch, the deliberate rhythm feels intentional and rewarding. The early scenes of routine, such as McCall reading at the diner or organizing his apartment, take on deeper meaning once viewers understand his internal struggle. What seemed simple at first becomes symbolic of discipline and self-control. Denzel Washington's performance significantly enhances rewatch value. His restrained acting style contains subtle facial expressions and micro-reactions that are easy to miss the first time. On subsequent viewings, the viewer can focus more closely on his internal shifts. The quiet moments carry additional weight. His pauses and measured speech patterns feel even more calculated. Another factor contributing to rewatch value is the film's thematic depth. The exploration of justice, responsibility, and identity encourages reflection. Audiences may interpret McCall's choices differently over time. Some may view him purely as a protector. Others may question the morality of vigilantism. These layered interpretations make the film more than a one-time experience. The final home art sequence also benefits from repeat viewing. Knowing how the confrontation unfolds allows viewers to observe the setup more carefully. The placement of tools, lighting changes, and environmental shifts become part of a larger strategy. Instead of focusing only on who survives, the audience can appreciate how each step is constructed. In terms of audience takeaway, The Equalizer leaves viewers with a clear message about responsibility and purpose. The film suggests that strength should be used to protect those who cannot defend themselves. McCall's transformation is not about seeking revenge or personal satisfaction. It is about accepting the responsibility that comes with capability. The movie also reinforces the idea that identity cannot be erased. McCall attempts to leave his past behind, but he ultimately understands that his skills define him. Instead of rejecting that reality, he channels it into something constructive. This message resonates with audiences because it reflects universal struggles with self-acceptance. Additionally, the film emphasizes discipline over chaos. McCall's control, preparation, and calm demeanor demonstrate that true power lies in restraint. This contrasts with characters who rely on fear and aggression. Ultimately, The Equalizer offers both entertainment and reflection. Its grounded action, psychological tension, and moral themes make it engaging beyond the first viewing. The takeaway is clear: strength without purpose is dangerous, but strength guided by principle can restore balance. If you are interested in watching The Equalizer from 2014, there are several practical ways to access the film depending on your preferences and region. Because distribution rights can shift over time, availability may vary, but the movie remains widely accessible across multiple formats. One of the most common ways to watch The Equalizer is through major digital streaming platforms. The film is often available for rent or purchase on popular video-on-demand services. Renting typically gives you a limited viewing window, usually 48 hours after you begin playback. Purchasing a digital copy allows you to stream the movie as many times as you want through that platform, depending on your account access. This option is ideal for viewers who value convenience and instant access without physical storage. In addition to rental and purchase options, the film periodically appears on subscription-based streaming services. These platforms operate on monthly membership models. When The Equalizer is included in a streaming library, subscribers can watch it at no additional cost beyond their regular subscription fee. However, streaming rights rotate. It is always important to check your local streaming service to confirm whether the movie is currently available in your region. For viewers who prefer physical media, The Equalizer was released on Blu-ray and DVD shortly after its theatrical run. The Blu-ray edition offers higher video resolution and improved sound quality compared to DVD. This format is especially beneficial for action films, where detailed visuals and layered sound design enhance the experience. Physical copies may also include bonus features such as behind-the-scenes footage, commentary tracks, or interviews with cast and crew. These extras provide additional insight into the filmmaking process. If you value audio and visual quality above all else, watching on Blu-ray through a home theater system will likely deliver the strongest experience. The film's controlled sound design, subtle score, and detailed cinematography benefit from high-definition presentation and surround sound. Action sequences, especially the home mart finale, feel more immersive when experienced with proper audio equipment. For viewers who prefer flexibility, mobile streaming through tablets, smartphones, or laptops is also an option. Most digital platforms allow playback across devices as long as you are logged into your account. This makes it easy to watch the movie while traveling or during commutes. However, smaller screens may reduce the visual impact of the darker cinematography. Another option is cable or satellite television broadcasts. The Equalizer occasionally airs on premium movie channels. If you subscribe to such services, you may find the film included in their scheduled programming. These broadcasts may contain edited content depending on network policies. If you are planning to watch the film for analysis or discussion, consider selecting a version with subtitles. Subtitles can help clarify dialogue during intense scenes and allow closer attention to performance details. This is particularly useful when studying tone, pacing, and character development. For viewers new to the franchise, watching The Equalizer first is recommended before moving on to its sequels. The 2014 film establishes Robert McCall's identity and moral code. The later films expand on his journey, but the foundation begins here. Before watching, it is helpful to understand that The Equalizer is rated R for strong violence and language. The film contains intense confrontations and mature themes. It is designed for adult audiences and may not be suitable for younger viewers. Ultimately, The Equalizer remains widely available across digital, streaming, and physical formats. Whether you choose high-definition Blu-ray for maximum immersion or digital streaming for convenience, the film can be accessed in multiple ways to fit your viewing preference. This concludes the full breakdown of The Equalizer, 2014. If you liked this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more gripping movie explanations like this.